some slides.
Yes, I love my slides. We have kind of 3 categories of things that I'm going to be talking about today. Again, thanks to everybody for playing on the PTR. We did get a ton of feedback. I'm not going to go over the specifics of everything that changed, but I'm going to go over kind of the categories of things just because there's a whole lot of changes. One of the first big ones was endgame survivability issues. So this is kind of talking about those people that went really far into the pit, and this is kind of something that's been happening on live as well that we wanted to address. And there's this phenomenon when you get really deep into the game and you're fighting high-level monsters where, you'll hit a point where the monsters are kind of easy and you're able to blow through with your really powerful builds, and then you kind of get to a point where they start one-shotting you. And it can be kind of mysterious and hard to understand, like, what's going on, why did this happen? We've also had some issues balancing that kind of top-end survivability when you get to those hard monsters in the game. One of the reasons for this is that variability in player defensiveness has been really high traditionally. This is why when you look at the new items in the game in Season 4, you don't see a damage reduction very much at all. It's a very premium stat now that's really hard to get, and it's to help solve this problem of when someone is stacking all damage reduction versus someone who has none of it, their difference in effective health and survivability is really, really high, and so it makes it hard to balance the game. Another part that we wanted to hit was really armor. That armor is kind of a really confusing stat. It's not really well understood how it works, and I'm going to be going over in a little bit how it works and what we're changing to kind of address both of these issues a little bit. Next is that some stats can get really high. We added all these crazy awesome stats, and you can juice them with masterworking and crit them and all these things. And it allowed for some really crazy things on the PTR, which people love to post constantly at me. And to be clear, we like crazy things. It's awesome to get powerful and have that fantasy. We do have to take into account things like combat clarity and computer performance to make sure that the game can still run very well for everybody. So we made some changes there to address that.
You mean it's not fun to just not see the screen or the ground?
I think it is for a little while. It is hilarious, I think.
Yeah, it's funny for a bit, but when you can only see patches of ground,
it's rough.
And when one player can do that, let alone when you get 4 of them in a group, it's great. And last but not least, balance changes and bug fixes. I'll be going over some of them, but there's way more than what I'm covering right now today. But just know, we took a lot of feedback on balance, a lot of feedback on bugs. There were a lot of them that were reported, and we acted on a lot of them, and I'll give an example of some that we did. All right, so let's go into armor. So, brief history lesson or description of how armor works today. This is like when you log in, how armor is functioning. It's your stat for physical damage mitigation. So you know how you have your elemental resistance that caps at 75 and then can get pushed up a little bit? Armor reduces your physical resistance up to a cap of 85%. It can't go higher than that. That's the number. But what's confusing is the amount of armor that you need to get to that 85% cap is actually based on the level of the monster that you're fighting. And I gave some examples here. These are the actual numbers in the game. So if you have a level 50 monster that's hitting you, whacking you, then you need 5,265 armor, and then you'll be at that 85% cap. But then at level 100, at every level, like 51, 52, 53, it's good, that number is going up of what you need. And at level 100, it's about 9,230, and then at level 150 monster, it gets close to 13,000, right? And so what this ends up, kind of creating is that the player really never knows when they're done with armor, right? That number can scale up forever. It's kind of a hidden system under the hood. So when you're fighting these monsters, and they get way higher level than you as you scale into the pit or nightmare dungeons or whatever, you don't really know how much you need. And so this is kind of really contributing to that phenomenon where you're fine, you're at the cap, and then the higher level monsters just start one-shotting you. So in Season 4, a lot of it's going to be the same as Season 3. It's still going to be your source of physical damage mitigation. The cap is still going to be 85%, and you're still going to need escalating amounts of armor as the monster level gets higher. But what we're changing here, if we go forward a little bit, is that armor is now going to cap at that level 100 monster number. So that 9,230, you can write down this number. We're also going to later get into the tooltip. We couldn't get it in for the launch of Season 4, but we'll have it soon after. But it's kind of going to be like elemental resistance, where you get to this number, and then you're kind of done with the system, right? So armor is just another thing on your checkbox of things you want to do as far as defensive survivability, and once you get it, you're done. You can get it from gear, legendary aspects, and so on.
It's basically just
particularly in Season 4, I think this will be a little bit of an easy number to hit. We're not trying to make this super difficult or hard to do. It'll be very achievable for you when you're a level 100 player. So here we have a zoom in on the tooltip so you can see This player has, way above that 9,000 amount of armor that they need. They have close to 16,000. But you can see there, that it's capped out at that 85% physical resistance. And again, soon after the launch of Season 4, we're going to actually put the cap that you need of the number that you're chasing, because we want you to know what the goal is that you're trying to hit.
So that means they have a lot of room for optimization, right?
Correct, yeah. This means that this player can actually give up armor on some of their, tempering or item affixes and look for other stats. Like, that's kind of the point. So next, stat caps. So, now that we've introduced a lot of ways to get really high amounts of stats in the game, we want to kind of control for visual clarity, what a player can put onto their screen. So kind of similar to some caps we have already in the game, like attack speed or elemental resistance, we're putting some caps on cooldown reduction and the increased area size. It's really fun to get those giant frost novas that cover the screen, but when it goes like 2 or 3 screens away, it can get really noisy and messy. So we still want these stats to be really powerful and impactful, but just control a little bit the amount of insanity that
increased area size cap.
And one thing on this cooldown reduction cap, to be clear, this is not just CDR across the entire game. This is just capping what you can get from gear. So this is like the base cooldown reduction you get when you first cast a skill, what it's going to be. You can still get cooldown resets or additional cooldown effects from things like the skill tree or legendary powers that just reduce the cooldown of your skills as you do certain mechanics.
So there's just a base cap.
This is just like the baseline cap.
Reduction from everywhere else.
I think when we looked at the cap for area effect too, we tested it on Frost Nova, and we were like pretty meticulous on what that cap should be, and it was still massive.
No, it's huge. Yeah. When I say like we're making a cap, you're still going to get to insanity when it comes to what's on your screen. It's still going to be awesome. So you can see here, this is just showing you what the tooltip looks like now. So we're going to be showing you, as a player, what those caps are, so when you're evaluating your gear on your tooltips, what it is. And then same thing here, you can see here, like the dust level area effect size bonus, it caps at 100%. Next, balance updates. So again, like I mentioned before, we made a lot of balance changes based on feedback. Again, thank you for playing and giving us all that feedback. I'm going to go over some of the things. One of the bigger categories of things was, again, like I mentioned, those changes due to combat readability and balancing player power. A few examples here of things that we're reducing are like the amount of dust levels that can be on your screen, and Fractured Winter Glass, one of my new favorite uniques we're bringing in, the amount of frozen orbs that could span the screen is going to be reduced a bit, so I want to prepare you all for that. Again, to be clear, you're still going to spawn a whole lot. It's just not going to be like insane amounts where you can't see things anymore. They're still going to be very powerful. I'm even going to show a video a little bit later of kind of the difference of PTR to what's going to ship in the game. Some other things though that we're doing, Fortify. We wanted to increase the amount of damage reduction that you get. This is just Fortify across the board, the base mechanic. That DR is going from 10 to 15%. And this was because before, when it was at 10%, we had to take into account that players could get damage reduction from a million different sources throughout the game. Now that it's more rare and more premium, we can actually make this mechanic in the game a little bit more impactful and feel like you're a tankier player for opting into this. These kinds of builds. We also made a lot of tempering affix updates. I'm not going to go into detail them, but just know like what you saw in PTR and what's going to ship, you're going to see a lot of improvements, a lot of balance changes, even some shuffling around of the affixes to make them in ways that make more sense. Based on feedback. And then we did do some class changes as well. I'm only going to give very few examples here, but just know that there were quite a few. One is Druid players. Companion Druid players always harass me. They want that build to work, and I agree. It's really cool. So we increased the health of Druid wolves by 200%, and we also reduced the respawn rate and cut it in half. So, we got feedback basically that, their companions were really good and fun and did damage, but in the late game they just kind of died and couldn't survive. So we're doing this to kind of address that feedback. All right, so here's dust devils as an example. So you can see on the left, this is just one barbarian by themselves, the amount of dust devils that they could produce, right? And then on the right, you can see kind of the same barbarian. You can see like the dust devils around the areas where the enemies are, they're still getting hit by a ton of them, but it's not covering the entire screen, right? And especially when you get like 3, 4, many players together, it really becomes insanity.
Yeah, especially when you're in a party of 4 barbs or, it's just like everyone's a barb and I don't know where I'm walking.
Yeah, and other classes can do that kind of thing too, not just barb, but this was kind of a good example. So, this is kind of seeing the difference between PTR and live. And then next we have another class change, so Scoundrel's Kiss. This is another one of our new uniques that rogue players gave us a lot of feedback on. So a quick summary of how this unique works is it kind of changes your rapid fire skill from shooting straight and hitting a single enemy into kind of a mortar skill where you shoot up into the air and then your arrows fall on the ground and explode. It's really, really cool, but one of the pieces of feedback we got was that when you launched the arrows, they would kind of go in a line and they wouldn't all hit the same enemy anymore. So if you were trying to do single target damage, it could actually be a nerf unless you like walked right up to the enemies and shotgunned them. And while there was a way to play around it, players weren't really happy that like we transformed the skill so much that it went from a ranged skill to kind of a melee skill. So we made an update here, and we have a video of the before and after. But basically, you see on the PTR on the left here how it goes in a big line, and then the player has to run right next to the target dummy to do the full damage to it. And on the right now, you'll see basically you target where those arrows are going to drop, and they just all go to that area. So you can hit a single enemy, but you also hit all the enemies around it because the arrows explode. So it should be a lot more usable compared to before.
Can Scoundrel's Kiss ricochet with my rapid fire?
I'm pretty sure, yes, it can. So it does all the things and inherits all the things that your rapid fire does.
That's very cool.
But can it double projectile?
I'm pretty sure it can, just like everything else. Yes. Yes. Spam everywhere.
Yes.
We love spam. And last but not least, bug fixes. Like I mentioned before, there were a whole lot of bug fixes reported to us. Thank you all for getting them. We addressed pretty much every single one that was reported. I'm giving some examples here, but again, we got a lot more than what I'm showing on the screen. One was Druid's Hurricane was incorrectly scaling damage basically infinitely, so we fixed that. Ebon Piercer, the extra missiles from our new unique, they incorrectly had 100% lucky hit chance, which is proccing a lot of crazy stuff. And then Flame Weaver, another one of the new things we introduced to the game. It's basically an effect where you can put a firewall on the ground and then you shoot firebolts through it and it'll split the firebolts. Really cool fantasy. But what happened in the PTR was you could stack a bunch of firewalls right on top of each other and they would split the firebolts multiplicatively and add more and more, way more than intended. So you could fire a ridiculous number of firebolts, which were crashing servers and things. So it wasn't great. But now we fixed that so it'll work properly. And again, we're still discovering and working on other fixes. There were a lot more that went in. If you reported it, it was very likely fixed. So basically, the build will be in a much better stable state.
They have
once
any
we launch. And that's really due to all your feedback. So thanks
No
again.
minions.
And yeah,
Awesome.
that's my section. So.
Yeah, I think I have a PowerPoint of my own.
Ooh,
There you go. Look at that.
fancy.
Yeah, so, as mentioned, tons of sweeping changes going into the Helltides and just overall balance of the game in general with Season 4. And kind of with that, sometimes, we push a little bit too far in some regards. So we did get feedback and also just own internal kind of fill checks on the Cinder drop rates were feeling a bit slow in the PTR. So we just went back, reviewed it, and gathered our feedback and just iterated on the drop percentage to hit closer to the
That's always
expectations
nice.
of how much we want to be collecting the cinders and interacting with the tortured gifts. So I think we're in a much better spot. I know we're in a much better spot right now, actually. So that was one of the first major pieces coming out from the PTR.
A lot more chests from this, yeah?
Yeah, chest, more loot, more fun.
Awesome.
Let's
More
see the next
boss
one. Yeah, so
summons.
on the topic of more is more fun, the Baneful Hearts, we were noticing that they were dropping a bit inconsistently. So you can get the Baneful Hearts from opening tortured gifts, killing the Hellborn, and one of the Doomsayer variants, one of our new activity types. But again, we want to get the Baneful Hearts in the hands of the players with a pretty steady cadence. So we noticed with the PTR that we're just not getting them as frequently as we wanted to. So we just went back, iterated, and kind of reviewed our bad luck protection to just ensure that we improve the consistency that Baneful Hearts are dropping. And this is all kind of like, the Blood Maiden is not meant to be seen as like this highly ambitious piece of content that you only engage with like once every 50 levels. We want you getting the hearts. We want you engaging with the social boss summoning mechanic. And I think it just adds that extra layer to the Helltides we want you to engage with. And on the topic of the Blood Maiden, overall, like we touched on earlier, the Blood Maiden is just seeing some overall rewards improvements. So as noticed, or as mentioned before, if you contribute to the summon of the Blood Maiden, you receive a bonus reward. But one of the things was that you couldn't really tell. There is a little icon that appears like where your buff bar, but the effects of that was largely unnoticed from both the team and actually just the PTR players themselves. So again, taking this opportunity to just review the overall value of the Blood Maiden for contributors and non-contributors alike. Because again, we wanted to make sure that she has a clear role in the Helltide experience. So again, overall, Blood Maiden is just overall more valuable. With this, we're dropping things like legendaries, Forgotten Soul, Lore Zermats, and a % chance for contributors at the end world tiers to get some end game boss materials as well.
Yeah, so this is now like an additional opportunity for players to get additional of the boss mats for the boss ladders. Which we've heard a lot about how players were like, hey, we only really have one kind of method to get them, and we wanted to expand that and bring that into more avenues so players didn't have to just kind of be like tunneled off into one area to get like specific boss mats, which is cool.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life.
Yes.
I like that the contribution encourages you to actually use these. In Season 2, I just chain summon the boss over.
It'll be pretty cool. But you're basically going to get like close to a completed build when it comes to opening those caches. They're guaranteed targeted legendaries to build a specific fantasy for every class. I think we have a video to show what they're going to be for every class in Season 4.
Maybe.
There. So Barbarian here, you can see we're going to be giving you a bunch of legendaries related to Dust Devils. The Druid, we're going to be giving you basically a pulverized build.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool. Next is the Necromancer. Of course, everybody's going to be playing minions, so we gave you a bunch of minion-focused legendaries. This should be pretty awesome. And then next is the Sorceress. We actually have a cool new legendary coming into the game for Incinerate, which you'll see here.
Yeah,
it splits up. So we were giving you an Incinerate build on the Sorceress. And then the Rogue, we're giving you one targeted toward Barrage. So again, kind of the point of this is that, if you don't really know what you want to play, or you really want to just go through a season journey and try out something before you go to a build that you really want to do, you have a foundation of something more complete to start with, which we're pretty excited